All right. Hi. Welcome back to this week's episode of Kind of a Bitch. So, I have been thinking about this topic for a little while. And truth be told, I think you're going to be a little bit on the journey of processing with me because the way that I like to work it is I often go through what I'm currently working on in this podcast. So, not everything is going to be perfectly fleshed out. And I hope you will hang with me in this. I shared last episode or a couple episodes ago. Honestly, I can't remember because I'm recording too many episodes. I started medication. And I have been thinking recently about how nice it feels to to feel more joy. And it got me thinking about that contrast of when you are super sick, you have like the worst cold ever, you're super stuffed up, you can't breathe at nighttime, you wake up with a scratchy throat. And then when you start to feel better, that gratitude, that immense amount of gratitude and excitement about simply being able to get a full night of sleep or breathe through your nose, it feels so powerful, so poignant, right? I have been feeling this way in my own life as I walk around in Seattle in what is turning into fall, right? And we have this kind of dreary weather some days, but I'll tell you what, I'm walking around, I'm like, wow, it's disgusting and rainy out, but look at how the yellow leaves glow against the dark skies. I mean, I'm feeling like I'm able to notice how much lighter I feel because of how heavy it felt for such a long time. And it really has me thinking, do we need friction to feel joy? Do we need some of the hard stuff in order to really notice when there's good stuff? And again, kind of like when you're sick, it really has made me realize how quickly we forget that feeling normal can feel incredible. So, yeah, I've just been thinking about do we experience more happiness when we've experienced the hard seasons? Like, is that how we fully experience joy? Or is it just the contrast of something going from a friction full experience to ease, to frictionless? So, yeah, today I'm going to explore a little bit of that. And I've got a couple of stories, but also a little bit of research for you because, well, it wouldn't be me if I didn't go down a little research rabbit hole. So here we go. To get us started, I personally believe that we live in a world that is obsessed with figuring out how to live the most easefully, how to optimize, right? We're optimize culture, this balance, hacks, finding your flow, right? Um, that comes up constantly. I mean, I do not believe that easy and easeful are the same thing. Okay, someone who has it easy or someone who approaches life in an easeful way, they are different. Um, but I am wondering that once life starts to get too smooth, can the joy, the little joys, the little wonders start to feel flat, like static or background noise? And so, I'm thinking here, maybe it's that we don't need pain to feel joy, but that joy to really experience it and taste it and feel it and relish in it, it needs texture. It needs something to bounce off of, right? Something to contrast against. When I ultimately decided that it might be a good time for me to go back into receiving medicinal support, a little SSRI moment. It was actually when I was sitting having one of my meltdowns with my husband while he was home. Listen, I consider myself to be a very independent gal. All right. I love my alone time. I do not have a problem traveling by myself or, when my husband is away for stints at a time, I really don't have an issue. But somewhere along the way of this last year, I started to experience extreme anxiety when he would leave. And I started to experience extreme anxiety when I would hear my phone ring or when I would simply wake up in the morning. And I thought to myself at first, I'm like, well, it's a busy season. It's just a busy season. But the heaviness that I felt on that day to day, the constant concern of what fire am I going to have to put out next, or what is the bad thing that someone is going to have to say when I get on the phone this time, or like an impending feeling of doom, of people being angry at me. And that's kind of where, in one of my discussions with my husband while he was home, he said, yeah, it doesn't really seem like you're experiencing much joy. And if you're not experiencing joy, then what's the point of all of this? And it was such a simple little phrase from him. And I know that I'm pretty sure he said it in a little bit of a jokey kind of, cutesy way. But it really got me thinking, if I'm not experiencing joy, if I'm struggling to access that emotion or that experience, even when things, because that was my other thing, is I would say, well, technically nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong. So I don't have the right to feel this anxious. I don't have a reason to feel this stressed or this sad or this scared or this um, numb, right? Because everything is actually okay. I mean, the rest of the world, there are people in the rest of the world who have it much harder than me, who are going through much harder things. And so, how do I possibly have the right to feel this way? And when he looked at me and said, yeah, it doesn't seem like you are experiencing much joy. And if you're not experiencing joy, then what's the point? I said, wow, well, that's the smartest thing I've heard all year, good sir. And when I went back to the doctor and they asked me all the questions that they usually ask you when you're going on antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication, they ask you the same set of questions, and there's always a like a spectrum that you have to answer from, and it's something along the lines of some days, most days, nearly every day kind of a vibe. Well, once I was asked those questions, I realized that every answer I had was nearly every day. Nearly every day, I'm feeling this high level of anxiety, of um, feeling frozen. And it, having that reflected back to me in the room was so eye opening because I didn't realize, like a frog in boiling water, I had gotten myself into a little bit of a deeper anxiety spiral and anxiety hole than I thought I had. But when I actually got onto the medication, it takes a little while to work into your system there, but I'll tell you what, I looked around and I realized how much easier it was for me to feel joy, and how much slower and how much of a tolerance I had built to the stressful stuff, where suddenly something that was a level 1 would get a level 10 response from me. A level 1 would now get a level 3. Like I didn't go from 0 to 100 so quickly. And I think it was because of the 9 months that I spent noticing how fast I could go from 0 to 100, how easy it was to go from calm to crying. Um, and how even when good things would happen, I was like, great. But I didn't feel joy. I kind of felt like, and when's the next scary thing going to come around the corner? And so now, having a little bit of chemical help, being able to see that, wow, like there is actually so much good stuff in this world that I am noticing more easily, like the color of the leaves and the fact that, oh my gosh, the sun is out more days than it usually is here in a Seattle October or a Seattle November. It is, wow, it is just it's so beautiful. And it has really led me to this clarity, this gratitude about how much good there is to be appreciated. And again, it wasn't fun to be in the bad place. It wasn't fun to be there, but I will say I am looking back on it now going, wow, it really did sharpen my appreciation for the ease that has followed. So, of course, I am wondering, okay, what is the science about this? What is the deal? Because, like, does joy really depend on contrast? And listen, there is some science. So, we're going to dig into it. First things first, the contrast effect. This is about how our brains measure joy. Psychologists have studied this for a very long time, truly. And there's something called the contrast effect, which basically means we experience happiness, comfort, satisfaction, all of that stuff relative to what came before it. So if you've been in a really tough stretch or you've been really sick or whatever it is, your brain adjusts to that lower baseline. So then when we get some relief or when the circumstances change or that ease arrives, right? It feels mind-blowingly incredible because you're experiencing such a difference in comparison to what you were just experiencing, the contrast, okay? And this connects to something called hedonic adaptation. And the researchers who did this are Philip Brinkman and Donald Campbell. And this is way back in the 1970s. So I'm sure there's new research, but I just like this little tidbit. But they found that after big highs or big lows, like winning the lottery or recovering from like a really bad accident or something, people eventually return to their usual baseline of happiness. So, of course, they experience a huge surge of overwhelming joy when they win the lottery. But at a certain point, when they're asked these questions about levels of happiness, they feel the same level of contentment they did at the previous status of their life. But the thing about this is that friction interrupts that adaptation. It resets the baseline. So suddenly the joy feels a lot brighter. It feels like you notice it more because you can actually register it. And it's why something like that first coffee after a super sleepless, work heavy week tastes absolutely incredible, or why after you recover from like breaking your foot or something, that first pain-free walk feels like incredible. And you're like, I can run. It's just you can't get enough of it. The moment itself didn't change, right? It's like still kind of a normal thing, but you did because that baseline, that adaptation, that baseline changed. And I just love that because I think it means that you're not broken. It makes me feel a little comfortable because I am looking at this going, wow, so you're not broken if the joy of things feels dull. If you're having trouble accessing that feeling, you might just need a little bit of a contrast again. And what about dopamine? This is the motivation molecule. We love her. Dopamine, it's the pleasure chemical, okay? But Andrew Huberman, you probably listened to his podcast, Huberman Lab. He's Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's a scientist from Stanford, and his whole discussion on this episode was that dopamine isn't actually about pleasure; it's about motivation through contrast. So he explains that dopamine spikes when we anticipate a reward, not when we get it, when we anticipate a reward, and it drops right after we achieve what we wanted. So, this cycle, the chase, the hard thing, the effort, like that is the part that primes your brain for satisfaction. And I think that's also why when I have a really hard week where I'm like, dang, I am grinding, like I cannot get out of this car, I'm on the phone constantly, man, when I like lay down at night, I feel so good. I feel so good because that contrast is there. But number two, when I get the paycheck, that's not the part that felt very good. I kind of just reset to going back to the beginning. And yes, that probably is a commentary on my need to maybe celebrate my wins a little bit more, but it just is what it is. I guess what I'm saying is that motivation, that moving through the discomfort, that push through the discomfort when we want something, that is what sets the brain up to feel joy. So if there's no friction, then there doesn't end up being any spark or any magic. And again, that's why earned joy, like completing a huge project and stuff, um, making a vulnerable ask or finishing something that you didn't think that you could, it feels so much better, so much richer, right? Than like constantly being comfortable. We start to get a little bored of being comfortable. It's contrast in chemical form. And lastly, I thought it would be good to note on physical contrast. All of us have seen this. It's not my personal favorite, but I did do it for a little while, was contrast therapy. This is the physical version of that friction idea. And this is a cold plunge, this is saunas, this is alternating between hot and cold exposures. And again, I think there's some competing research here. What I've noted is that research has found this kind of short term stress, like being exposed to this type of short term stress followed by comfort, can boost your dopamine and serotonin levels for hours. For hours. I was going to say days, but that's getting a little excited. It teaches your nervous system to recover. It teaches you resilience, physical resilience, how to recover, how to reset, and then how to eventually get back to a balanced state. And again, there is some conflicting research about whether or not this is beneficial for everybody, men, women, certain types of people. But I do think the science itself is interesting to think about regardless. And again, it's not that we all need to start jumping into ice baths, because let me tell you, I did do ice cold showers for, it was like majority of 20, I'm going to give myself less credit than that. Probably like 4 to 6 months of 2020. Okay. 4 to 6 months, ice cold showers, finishing off with a warm shower because I was like, I want to get motivated. I want to get out the door. I was working in a new job and I just wanted to feel, I don't know, a sense of, and it was, COVID. So there was a lot happening. I wanted to feel this kind of sense of energy. Um, but anyway, I'm not saying that people all need to start doing cold plunges, but I do think it's fascinating how our bodies and our minds both register joy through difference. We register joy better through there being a difference. Friction followed by flow. Say that 5 times fast. Effort followed by ease. That's the pattern that we are built for. Cool. So, all of this said, I I suppose the goal is not to eliminate friction, right? But it is to understand what it's doing for us. Um, because some seasons just freaking suck, and if you are someone who's listening to this who's like, that's mine right now, you're kind of who I'm talking to. Some seasons are brutal, but I suppose I like to take the viewpoint that it is leading to something better and that the good will feel better on the other side. And as I'm processing this to you, I am wondering to myself, I wonder if there are ways to inject little bits of joy in a better way. Like if that joy of novelty would be helpful, kind of like getting out of a funk, which was in a previous podcast episode. But anyway, I do think that friction can clarify what we care about, right? It kind of shows us, it slows us down long enough to start to notice what is really mattering to us. And I don't want to glorify burnout or struggle or hustle culture or anything like that. I want to stop fearing the texture of life, like fearing the difficult times, the dips, the pauses, the stuckness, the plateaus, because I think they are what make the peaks like feel really pleasurable and rewarding. I a recent joy that I have been sharing, and I'm kind of giggling. I'm about to tell this, and I haven't even told my husband. But you know what? He's editing the podcast, so he gets to hear it live, just like you do right now. Um, I This contrast. My husband's traveling a ton this year, a ton. I did the numbers, and it was at least 140 days. Okay, at least 140 days of him being gone, and I like I said, I'm an independent girly. I love my alone time. But on top of all this stuff, I became so aware of how much my partner is a partner, how much he supports my emotions, my career, our household, um, and suddenly becoming very aware of how much I don't have access to him, or I didn't have access to him this year. He's home in well, when you're listening to this, it'll be tomorrow, but it's it makes me feel like I'm almost in like a re-honeymoon period with this person who I've been with for going on 11 years. Because suddenly we have this contrast, and that is that distance makes the heart go fonder. There's a reason that that phrase is out there, because suddenly you're so aware of what it's like to not have that person there. And yeah, I could not be more excited that he is returning. And so, again, even though I know what it's like to be around him for large periods of time, but this joy that I'm feeling about him coming back and us having a little bit more of an extended period together, it's the joy itself is not louder. It's not louder. It's just I feel it more because of this contrast, right? I'm more aware of it. I'm able to process it and absorb it and register it better because I have this contrast. So, anyways, maybe the point isn't that we need pain to feel joy. Um, but I think there is something to be said about joy existing in that relationship. To the hard thing, to contrast. Like music or like dance. There's like a tension, there's momentum, there's slowness, there's the way that people speak. They speed up and they slow down because it keeps you interested, it keeps you focused. There are ways to showcase, when I'm coaching my public speaking clients, there are ways to showcase what you want people to hear based on your tempo, your pitch, your volume. Um, and the only reason that that makes sense is because of the contrast between one or the other. It can't all be harmonious, because then we lose interest. So when life feels friction filled, I suppose my last thought here is that it might not be. I would like to not look at it as punishment, right? As yeah, as punishment. I would like to not look at it as punishment. I just think that it might be the verse before the chorus, and you need both to make a really good song. So the setup for joy to land really well again, fully and beautifully, is to have something that kind of gives it a good jumping off point. Feels a little hard. Anyways, maybe the point here is not to chase joy or to try and make life a lot easier all the time, but I do think that I would like to start noticing this friction a little bit more, to really kind of flow in it instead of resisting and hardening against it, instead of feeling this hesitation or this fear against the times that might be hard. Because I really don't think that joy is like a fragile thing. I think it's super resilient. And I I yeah, I think that it shows up once we've had that hard, it grows, the joy grows from the hard stuff. Anyways, thanks for coming on that journey with me. Perhaps you've picked up something to noodle on or to chew on. If you have any thoughts about this particular topic, it's certainly something that I am playing with as we speak, that I'm trying to observe and play around with in my everyday life. So if there's something that resonated or something that you want to share, please, as always, feel free to get in touch. You can DM me or email at the email in the show notes. But all that said, thank you for listening to this week's episode of Kind of a Bitch, wherever and whenever you're listening. And I will talk to you next time. Bye.